Hey, what's up? This is Mark at alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today, we're going to continue on the simple Phoenix LiveView series, and what we're going to do is add comments to our podcasts in the listing page so that they show up here as you can see in production. We can see the number of comments on each podcast. It's a pretty common thing to want for any sort of blog or podcast listing, any kind of media feed. And this isn't going to have anything to do with LiveView, so it's a pretty self-contained episode. First thing is the database structure. We have podcasts, and each podcast has many comments. Since there are a lot of podcasts, and each individual podcast could have a lot of comments, though this one doesn't, we don't really want to load every single comment of every single podcast in the listing page. Instead of doing that, we just want to get the count of the comments, because keep in mind each comment includes its HTML, it includes some status information, who wrote the comment, and so on. So we're going to rewrite our list podcasts function in our context module. This context is called content. Do a find there, list podcasts. Oh, there we go. It was right at the top. Let's first change this into pipe syntax just to make it a little bit easier to change. So we'll do podcast repo.all. This has absolutely zero effect on anything so far, but we can also do things like change the order. So we'll say order by, this function's just imported from Ecto. We'll order by the ID. And now we've got all the podcasts in order. We actually want to do the reverse order of that. We want it to be descending from the highest ID to the lowest ID. All right, that looks a little better. Next, we need to get the comment associations, or we need to get the comment counts. So we'll make a new function just called get comment counts. And then, let's see, not going to have any arguments. We'll do from P in podcast, which is the name of our podcast schema. We'll join C in ASOC, which is association, P and comments. Let's save that and recompile and have a look at what that looks like. So we'll do content.get comment counts. And we can see we've just got this little Ecto query there. So obviously we need to do something to get that from the repo. Repo.all. And try this again. And you can see now we're getting, we're basically just getting all the podcasts with the comments loaded. We don't want all that data. So the next thing we'll do is we'll group by. We'll be grouping by the podcast ID, and then we'll just select the thing we want, which is going to be, we'll make a tuple here with the podcast ID, and then the count of all the comment IDs, which we've gotten here. So we're basically associating comments, all the comments of all the podcasts, we're grouping them by the podcast ID, so we get the comments for the same podcast together. Then we're selecting how many of them there were and returning that with the podcast ID. So let's recompile this, and then we'll do content.get comment counts again, and we can see podcast number 3 has 3 comments, podcast number 1 has 3 comments, podcast number 2 has 4 comments. This isn't the easiest format to work with though. So let's enum.map this, or enum.into this into a map. So enum.into, and just give it an empty map. And now recompile that, get the comment counts again. We get them in a much nicer format. So we see podcast number 1 has 3 comments, number 2 has 4, number 3 has 3. And this map is something we can work with pretty reasonably in our list podcast function. All right, so what we'll do is we'll use this new function in our list podcast. So we'll make a variable here, comment counts, and that's just going to be equal to whatever the function we just wrote returns. Then the next thing is to put these comment counts into the podcast entries, and we don't have anything in podcast to do that. We just have these fields, and comments is an association that we're not loading, so we need a new field. That's going to be comment count, and that's going to be an integer, default to 0. We don't ever want that to be nil because we're going to be using it in our templates, and then virtual true so that it's not in the database. If we recompile, we should be able to content.list podcasts, and you'll see, hopefully, we have a comment count here with nothing. So that's fine. It's nothing because it's just the default and we didn't put it in, but we've got this handy little get comment counts function written for us. So we can just merge this map with this one up here with the return of the repo.all. So to do that, we'll just do enum.map. We'll take the element we get back. So remember, this is going to be a list of podcasts, and we'll use the map update syntax. So we'll update each element. So that'll be the podcasts comment count, and that's going to be comment counts. Now notice this is a map, so we can get the comment counts of the first element or the second element by just using this syntax. It'll be $1.id, and that should be all we need. Maybe an or 0 in case there's nothing there at all. Okay, we'll recompile it again and list the podcast again. All right, it's not $.1. And well, we'll just go to index podcast. There we are. So we've got this string.slice of the podcast notes. This is getting the first 200 characters of that and then joining a ... to it. Well, we'll just join one more thing to it. Actually, let's put this on a new line. I think that's a little bit cleaner. We'll in addition to joining that, we'll join the comment count of the podcast. So that'll be podcast.comment count. And we better toString that as well. So comment count should just get appended right after it. Yeah, there we go. Now this isn't the nicest display for it though, so let's make a little helper function in our podcast view to handle that for us. So podcast view. And we'll make a function called comment count string. It'll take an integer since that's what we have. So we'll just call that n. And based on what that integer is, we'll return an appropriate message. So I think, well, first of all, we'll handle the pluralization or not. So if we have n of 1, then we'll return actually, let's put it in parentheses. We'll just say one comment. Actually, one comment. And if n is 0, then we'll say no comments. And then if n is anything else, we'll just say however many n is. So n comments, plural. And then in our index page, now we've written that, we can replace this toString with comment count string just directly from the comment count. Add one more space here. And that pretty much does it. We've got the comments showing up as desired. Great thing about having this function here in the podcast view is not just the index, but also the individual show pages can use it. So looking at the deployed site, we see 2 comments pluralized on the first episode. The second episode only has one, and we get the same behavior that we wanted and only have to implement it once. That's it for today. See you next time.